Good morning. It is the Thursday, January 16th, at Senate Agriculture. We have the honor of having the Secretary, Anton Tebbetson, today with a bunch of his folks, and you folks are the reason why we're here. So, Secretary, we're just going to have a wide-ranging discussion of whatever you want to tell us today. We have an hour and a half for you to get through whatever you think that we ought to know at our first introductory meeting. We have a brand new committee other than Senator Collmore. There's no detail that's too small that you think that we ought to know. So welcome and thank you for coming.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here, and congratulations on your election, and congratulations on landing in this committee. It's a wonderful committee, and we're going to do some great things. And as you know, our farmers and producers and those out in the rural parts of Vermont and those even in our downtowns producing wonderful food for Vermont and our region. So we're delighted to be here. So we do have a lot of people with us today, and we're going to talk about ticks. We're going to talk about entomology. We're going to talk about gas pumps. We're going to talk about avian flu. We're going to talk about economic development. We're going to talk about cows. We're going to talk about milk. So all that good stuff is right here with us. So we'll do that in a moment. But I first wanted maybe just give you a sense, and it's our mission statement at the agency, and I think it's important that it gives you an idea of what we're all about. And the mission statement is: facilitate, support, and encourage the growth and viability of agriculture while protecting the working landscape, human health, animal health, plant health, consumers, and the environment. So that's what we do. So that touches our lives and everyone's lives every day as you come to work and whatever. So it's a pretty wide-ranging mission statement, but we're glad to help with that. I wanted to begin. I think maybe I'll start with the weather that you all have lived over the last couple of years and how it's impacted many of your constituents and so forth in every region of Vermont. So we know that, a little history, we know we've had two significant floods in 23 and 24, and it's created a lot of challenges. And through that, we've been talking with our farmers, and we've got some data to share with you about, we've had some granting programs through the Commerce and Economic Development Agency and agriculture, some of the losses, but I'll just give you a scope of the losses that some of our farmers have been having over the last couple of years. So we had 23 and 24 with, it began with a hard frost in 23. Some of your constituents may have lost some berries, may have lost some vines with the wine industry, and some of you may have lost some, strawberries and a lot of vines and all that kind of stuff happened during that period of time. So it was about a $10 million loss in May of 23. Everything was blooming, and then we got a hard frost. So it was pretty significant for the fruit and veggie business. And then we had our flood in July of 23. And we think the losses were up over close to $70 million in the food system for 23. And also we are keeping an eye on the forestry industry as well. They've had some severe weather, everything from, not freezing and not being able to get into the woods over some of the last couple of winters, and some severe weather. So we think it's about $3 million in just the forest economy alone. And then we had another one this year. The flood was not as significant, but it did hit some regions extremely hard, and some of our farmers got hit twice. So they got 23 and they got 24. So the economic losses of that, again, are significant, well over close to 14 million, we think, in that area. Luckily, we've got some help on the way from the federal government, and this is probably the headline for all of you that's coming our way that will help us. With the help of the congressional delegation and Senator Welch on the Ag Committee, Vermont will receive a block grant for some relief for our farmers. Essentially what it is New England states, Hawaii and Alaska will receive a direct appropriation, which most likely will come to the Agency of Agriculture, and then we will issue grants of severe losses from 23 and 24. The total pot of money is 220 million that will come to New England and those Hawaii and Alaska. USDA has asked us to send in all our data, all our losses, what we think it is, and then they will send back a number to us. And then we'll develop a program to get some money out to our farmers and producers from that. So we're still waiting on that. We've submitted our memo to USDA through the Farm Service Agency, and we'll wait to hear back what they get, what our dollar figure will be. And we don't know, because we don't know the scope of what happened in other states. You know, there was significant flooding, and some of our other New England states, Massachusetts had some, Connecticut's had some, and then the other part is forestry is included. So there may be some fires that were included in, you know, Hawaii or Alaska. So that's the good news. So we'll keep you apprised of that. If you talk with any of your farmers constituents, just let them know that we'll be developing that program as it moves forward. Yeah.
Secretary, do you know yet how you'll prioritize the money that will be distributed? Is it by a certain type of farm or the amount of loss? Have you?
I think we have not figured that out, and we've asked. We think it will be flexible money, which is good. For example, we've asked them. We've had some of our producers that may have been in the floodplain would like to move maybe their hoop house or the greenhouse out of the floodplain and move it to higher ground. Would that be an eligibility way we could use the money? And they're looking at that. But you know, I think. You know, we've had, you know, crop losses will be part of it, you know, under the state program that we call the BGAP program, that was agriculture was part of the Commerce Plan. That was 30% of their losses. So and that was physical losses. So it wasn't like, for example, if someone had you pick your own blueberries, and they weren't able to do that, they could do the economic loss of that. They could do the physical losses of it and so forth. So, so they've only, a lot of them only be covered about 30% of their losses. So I think there's a lot to make up, because, you know, some farmers, you know, lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in these floods. But we put a series of questions to USDA to answer some of those questions. And we hope it will be flexible money that we can do, maybe some mitigation dollars as well. So if farmers wanted to do something, as well as just the economic loss that they've had and the physical loss, that we can do something more flexible. We'll get that. We hope to get some of those answers, and we don't know I think we don't know the timetable on this. I think there is some effort to move it along, because some states have had no programs at all for their producers or farmers. So some states are really pushing for USDA to make some decisions.
So usually, Secretary, when we are seeing this type of money come out of there's mandates, or there's a lot of direction that comes from the source of the money. And it sounds like you're not hearing a lot of that right now. It sounds like it's gonna be kind of up to you to figure out how to get that out the door.
I think so. There will be some things that we will have to follow. There is another program through FSA with crop loss, and one thing that they did say to us, they don't want to pay a farmer out of this and then pay him out of this as well. So we've got to make sure that they're not getting two payments from, because there's another larger USDA program for crop loss that they've authorized as well, but that's being run by the federal government. This one will be comes to us, and then we'll get the money out in a program.
I think we had some more.
You asked it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And please follow up, and you have to forgive me, because I'm a bit of a neophyte as far as agriculture, so as much as you can learn. Is there insurance for these losses, and is it through government insurance or private companies? There is
an insurance program that is run through USDA, but as we found through our, we have a flood task force that we stood up at the end of 23. The return on investment is pretty limited. Our farmers essentially don't have the size and scale to really take advantage of some of those insurance programs. And Nicole Dubuque is here as head of operations. She's the co-chair of our task force. They've done a deep dive on the insurance issues with farmers. And I think they've made some recommendations that would have to be made at the federal level to make it kind of more to our size and scale. But there are some that do participate in crop insurance. But the biggest feedback we've heard is the effort's too big and it doesn't really return enough. So that's part of a bigger national issue with, because they're designed for some of the larger rural crops. So.
Thank you.
So it sounds like we're gonna have a lot more to talk about that at some other time.
Yeah.
We have more information, so we'll,
Yeah. And we really, once we welcome any feedback, if you hear constituents, what you think they need, and then we'll develop that program. And of course, messaging will be very helpful for you all to, once we know what it is, to make sure people know about the program, because everyone is so busy. You got to really tell people 6 times that this is it. And we're trying to develop it will be somewhat easy and efficient for them to apply. That will be one of our goals as well. So that's good, and we're appreciative that we can 23 and 24, so both of our severe weather events as well. I don't know if I can pass it along to some of the directors.
Whatever you.
Okay,
Sure. This is your
And-
time.
Sure, and why don't we start with Steve Dwinell's going to come up, and Steve does a lot with pesticides and entomology and so forth, and he's one of our directors, and he can tell you what he all does.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Steve Dwinell. I'm the Director of the Division of Public Health and Agricultural Resource Management for the agency. And we're a relatively small division. We're a regulatory division. We have 11 statutes we're responsible for implementing. We have 19 full-time staff. We have between 6 and 8 seasonal people we bring on to help us during the active seasons. We have 9 general areas, 9 general program areas. One of them is to register and regulate agricultural inputs like fertilizer, commercial feed, seed, and pesticides. So we register those, make sure they meet the standards they're supposed to meet, and work with those industries to make sure they're in compliance with the statutes. We regulate plant nurseries. So we inspect and regulate nurseries that sell plant material to make sure they're not selling, invasive plants or plants that shouldn't be distributed. We inspect them for disease. If they have diseased plants, we'll, have them pull them out of the stock, that kind of thing. And it's kind of a minor function, but an interesting one is we also register ginseng harvesters. So folks that harvest ginseng and sell it have to be registered. We have a set of rules that are associated with that. We register, inspect, and assist Vermont beekeepers. So we have a full-time apiarist, state pollinator health specialist who, just as an aside, was just elected to be the president of the Apiary Inspectors in America. So she's well respected in the industry, obviously, and knows what she's doing. So do we certify and license pesticide applicators and dealers? So we have any pesticide that's distributed in the state has to be registered. And we have 3 different categories of pesticides. We have category A, category B, category C. Category A are products that can only be bought by or sold by people who are certified to handle those pesticides. And we have category B, which is called controlled sale. You don't need a certificate, don't have to be certified to buy it or use it, but there are limited places that can sell them. And then they have to have a particular license to sell those. And then we have a category C, which are the general run-of-the-mill, consumer kind of things you can buy at Home Depot or Walmart or whatever. We ensure compliance with pesticide rules. We have a set of rules regarding how pesticides have to be used. That includes record keeping, storage and disposal. And we respond to any complaints that anybody might have about a pesticide use. We have 4 field inspectors each have a part of the state that they're responsible for. They get to know the applicators in their region, and they inspect them on a regular basis and answer any questions. They also participate in training courses. We have a whole series of training opportunities that we provide to certified applicators and to licensed dealers. And so we try to make sure they know what's going on.
I'm starting to hear some complaints on some of the ag stores about some of what we passed last year about, rodent, pesticides and stuff that are coming off of the shelves that, people are, obviously we passed the law, so they can't be on the shelves. Are you hearing, any pushback from any of the dealers?
Well, we've heard some grumbling, I guess you could put it, but I mean, we were pretty active in educating about what they had to do. We also had an effort, and we can do another briefing on it if you'd like. We made a pretty active effort to educate folks who sell rodenticides what the requirements are. So, for example, a lot of the rodenticides, which can be bought still just by consumers, it's a legal requirement that they be put into a bait box. You can't distribute, you can't just go out there and throw them around. They have to be in a bait box. And that wasn't being communicated to consumers. So if you go to any store now that sells rodenticide, you'll see a sign that says, if you use these materials, you have to put them in a bait box. So we've done that and educated the consumers about that. We have a video which Hanson narrated, which is on YouTube, which talks about how to do that. So anyway, we had an effort to do that. But yeah, that was, and actually that's part of a national effort. There's a national, at the level of EPA, to further restrict certain types of rodenticides, the ones that could potentially have secondary toxicity to predators. And again, we have a whole briefing on that if you'd like. It's a lot of details. We also have a program where we collect water samples, surface water and groundwater samples for pesticide residues. We do it, we have a number of established surface water monitoring sites. The Department of Environmental Conservation does that also. We collaborate with them, so we have, we share information and keep an eye on what's showing up in the surface water and in groundwater. We issue and enforce permits for certain types of pesticide applications. So under our rules, if you want to do a right-of-way application, if you want to apply mosquito adulticides with a ULV truck, do an aerial application, or do an invasive species control on property, not your own property, but outside your own property, you have to have a permit. And so we have a process. On golf courses too. All the golf courses are permitted by us. And so we have a program for that. And then two other areas which is something I'd like to talk a little bit more about. We conduct surveillance for mosquito diseases, ticks. So we have a pretty active program where the tick surveillance actually just finished up. They do a fall, and they'll do another one in the spring. And then we'll start in about May, we'll start doing mosquito surveillance. We have about 100 plus sites that we put traps out and check them on a regular basis, collect mosquitoes, identify them to species. And certain species we'll send off either to the Department of Health lab or to CDC in Colorado and have them test them for viruses. And that's one thing I wanted to just bring up is last year in that program, we had a record number of mosquitoes that had the Eastern equine encephalitis virus. And you may recall we had 2 human cases, 1 death. Yeah. And a horse death. Yeah. And the way that particular virus works with the mosquito population, the species that carries it, it goes in a cycle, and we're afraid we're on the uptick part of the cycle. So we're kind of anticipating and getting ready for a higher number of occurrences next year. And we're working real closely with the Department of Health, and giving all the information we have. And then if the numbers of mosquitoes carrying the disease are high enough, and the population is high enough, we may have to do some treatment. may have to do an aerial treatment in certain parts of the state to knock the population down. So we're kind of gearing up for that too.
If you do that now, I mean, I assume, I mean, I've lived in Brandon, Vermont for a while, down in that area, and I can remember, you know, this going around, and I can remember one bad year, it was just terrible.
Right.
So that's a program that happens.
Well, so
As
in Brandon and Whiting, and a couple other towns in that area, yeah, have there are two organized mosquito control districts in the state, Lemon Fair and Otter Creek watershed. And it's based in Brandon. And they do routine monitoring and treatment for what are called nuisance mosquitoes, which are basically just mosquitoes that aren't, we're not suspecting that they're carrying disease, but there are high enough numbers that they're a problem. And so those are programs that we permit and regulate and work with, you know, make sure they're following the rules and are doing it properly. But for what I'm talking about is if the populations of the particular species of mosquito that carry this disease are high enough. And last year they're up in the northwest part of the state.
Right.
And that area doesn't normally get mosquito control. So we'd have to do something there. We have contracts in place with aerial applicator, specialized aerial applicator and ground-based treatment that if we had to, we'll go in there and knock those populations down. The decision to do that will have to be made by the Department of Health though. Secretary Levine will be the one that decides if you do it or not, but we're just gonna be ready to do it.
But typically the area that's had the virus isn't a place where you would do a controlled spray,
No,
but you're just preparing to.
right, exactly, yes.
Well, why do you suppose that it would be up in there, in that area, and not down into a heavy populated area as far as in Brandon, Forestdale area?
Well, the reason is because, so the Eastern equine encephalitis virus is transmitted by a particular species, Culicidum milner, I don't know if it has a common name actually, but it breeds in acidic hardwood swamps.
Okay.
So, the problem with that particular mosquito, and it primarily feeds on birds, and so it's a bird mosquito disease cycle. But if the population gets high enough, you can occasionally get spillover to humans or horses, and it's a very, if you get the infection, a lot of people, you can get bitten and not have a reaction, but if you do get the reaction and you do get the encephalitis, it's got a very high mortality rate. So it's a real problem, so we really are worried about it. But that's the reason that area, because that's where the swamps are, basically. The Missisquoi Wildlife Refuge was a real hot spot last year for that.
Sure. How do you balance pesticides with the uptick? No pun intended.
Yes, no, that's the question.
Yes,
right.
Particularly last year was a high tick.
Yeah, so mosquito control is a pretty sophisticated process. And just as sort of real context, I was in Florida for 30 years, and it was, the regulator of the mosquito control programs in Florida, and we did a lot of that kind of work because they had a lot of problems. Obviously Florida has a lot of mosquitoes, but anyway, you have to balance it, and you only treat when the population is high enough, and you can get control. You don't just go out and treat. So you monitor the population very carefully, and you time the application to hit the mosquitoes. And the particular application that's used is an aerial ultra low volume is what it's called. And so it's an aircraft that flies at about 300 feet and releases a very fine mist of insecticide at a very low rate. We're talking fractions of an ounce per acre. And it basically forms a fog that moves through the air column as the mosquitoes are flying, and you put just enough out there to knock the population down. You also do it at a time, you do it at night, so people aren't around or, active. Bees aren't flying, pollinators aren't active. You're trying to minimize any risk to any other, so you're trying to hit just the mosquito population, just the right dose. And then we do so we'll monitor all that, and then we'll do a post-treatment surveillance to determine if it was, effective, and we got the population down to where we need it to be.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Steve, does there seem to be a correlation between the change in temperatures? We haven't had below zero, and I don't know what the threshold is for either tick or mosquito, but at some point they don't thrive.
Yeah, well, the species we have in Vermont are adapted to survive cold temperatures. So, a particularly severe winter isn't gonna like solve the problem. Obviously, the more warm temperature, the wetter it is, that's more conducive to mosquitoes. And actually, high moisture is actually a little worse for ticks because they have parasites that get them. But anyway, the bottom line is they're doing fine. and we're gonna have to live with them.
They can adapt.
Right. They've been doing this for a while and they know what they're doing. So we just have to, it all boils down to surveillance.
Yeah.
And keeping an eye on it and having trained people who know what they're doing and collecting the correct information, which is one of the reasons we work with Otter Creek. We want to make sure they, they have the skills that they need, because it is technically challenging to do it. And the good news is that the science of mosquito control is pretty sophisticated. There's a lot of work that's been done on how to do it correctly. So anyway,
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and let other folks talk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Abby, you want to?
We're gonna move into economic development now.
Yes,
A lot going on there.
Morning.
good morning.
Abby?
For the record, Abby Willard, I'm the director of the Ag Development Division at the agency. So we're one of the 6 divisions that many of which you'll hear from today. A major difference being that we're a non-regulatory division. So we do focus on economic development. We have 23 staff, which has grown significantly in the last 5 years. A third of our staff are supported with general fund dollars that are appropriated by this body. And 2/3, the remainder, are supported with special funds or federal resources. So one of the things that our agency and the Ag Development Division is good at is like bringing federal resources to the state. And with that, we've been able to grow our economic development team pretty significantly in the last 5 to 10 years. We have 5 sections within the division: market development, marketing and focus on export, and then 2 sections that are focused on specific programs. So one is the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative, which is our longest standing economic development program, been in existence since 2012. And then the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center, which is housed at the Agency of Agriculture, though it serves the 11-state Northeast region. And again, that's a federally supported program. And then we have a grants and contracts team. So given the hundreds of different grants that we put out every year in contracts, having an effective grants and contracts team that's very familiar with Bulletins 5 and 3.5 is really important part of the work that the division does. So what we do is we support a lot of businesses, we build partnerships, we make investments that help either grow markets or explore innovative new product development or creative solutions to challenges that businesses are facing. We focus a lot on messaging and communication and community engagement. So I would say that sort of summarizes a lot of the activities that the economic or the Ag Development Division does. Much of our work is spent in distributing grants. So in fiscal year 24, which is the last fiscal year that we have kind of like a full data set for, since we're in fiscal year 25 currently, we released 22 different funding opportunities, some of those with state dollars, some of those with federal resources. And we granted out over $11.4 million in fiscal year 24 to over 260 recipients, which is probably the largest, significantly largest kind of investment year that the division has had in forever. But what's even more kind of both alarming and I think telling is the number of applications that those programs received. And Senator Colmore's heard me report on this year over year about sort of the oversubscription that our programs have. But in fiscal year 24, we had businesses and organizations request over $108 million in economic development asks from over 1,290 businesses and organizations. So we were able to fund just over 10% of the requests. And that means we have about 1,000 different business proposals and projects out there that we weren't able to invest in. So that may mean that those businesses are holding and waiting for another round of grants, whether it's through our agency or somewhere else, or they've made the decision to try to finance that project on their own, or they've sort of decided that that's not a growth or innovation or expansion that they're able to do. So we're very attuned to that population of individuals that didn't receive grants just as much as we are to celebrate the impact of those businesses that were awarded. I think another piece that might be of interest, and we have subject matter experts that can come in and talk to the committee about, you know, the various different granting programs. So if you wanted to do a deeper dive into the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative program, we have staff that could come in. If you wanted to hear about the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center, we have a team that would come in. Last year, we had a new granting program called the Ag Development Grants, which were focused on specific sectors of diversification and investment in meat, maple, and produce. And we could talk about that program specifically. So just putting it out there that I can go into some detail if you have it, but it seems like it may make sense to kind of dedicate some specific time if you had specific questions. But the ways in which we make investments in agriculture and the food system, which is our, the economic development goal, is to see a vibrant working landscape and explore kind of market growth and business viability improvement for our ag producers and our ag sector. So some of the ways that we do that are investing in different sectors. So we've had the opportunity of targeted granting programs that could invest in dairy or meat, maple, and produce, as I mentioned, in specialty crops. We also have been able to invest in businesses at different sizes and scales and stages of development. So investing in small farms. So last year, this legislative body supported a small farm diversification and transition program that was targeting specific size farms that were wanting to expand into something new, a new product, a new market channel. And then we also have funding opportunities that invest in larger scale businesses that are ready to do international export. And so we can offer them trade show assistance grants for them to be able to go to different trade shows around the world, but generally around the country, to connect to new buyers and new markets. We invest at different stages in what we call the supply chain. So we can invest on farm where production is occurring, or in what's referred to as like the middle of the supply chain, where there's distribution or the storage or value-added processing, which is like a very critical infrastructure piece that we've learned over the last decade plus, that there's a lot of bottlenecks in that sector to ensure that our product make it to market. And then kind of supporting different market access opportunities at the buyer stage.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So I had the fortunes of being asked to go to Taiwan, and I went in November, and I went with 2 senators from Maine, 2 from New Hampshire, senator from Massachusetts, 2 House members from Rhode Island, and Senator David Weeks and I from Vermont. And my mission was, I took over about 20 little bottles of maple syrup. My mission was to get 20 to hundreds of thousands of gallons of maple syrup into the Far East. And had I had another 20 days, I could have done that. But I just didn't have enough time. But what we are trying to work with now is, in fact, we just had our first meeting, is to set up an economic office of 5 states in Taiwan. And to do that, and I think that we can probably get Massachusetts to crack that biggest nut of that, because of their scope of what they have, and so I would talk with you about that at some time, if we could do that. In fact, I am going to have one of the Maine senators is now chair of agriculture in Maine, and I do plan to have her come down to the State House here. And so we would be very interested in meeting and trying to set something up over there. The access to those markets over there are unbelievable. We've met with all the trade ministers. I mean, we're talking about getting into 6,000 different vendors and marketplaces by just having, and it's not just trying to sell this product in Taiwan. It's just Taiwan's the beacon of freedom over there, and to be able to have this office. And at one time, Vermont did have an office there, from what I understand. And that sometime during the Shuman administration or some point in time, they had ceased operations over there. So, we'd be very interested in furthering that to get these Vermont, well, in fact, to be fair to the other 4 states besides ourselves, to get New England product over into that area of the world, I think would be very, very great.
Yeah, that's really exciting. We have participated, the agency has participated in a variety of trade missions that sounds like a very similar effect, which is sort of bringing Vermont products and producers and economic development staff we went to Japan, we've been to, to China, to other countries to sort of explore market opportunities and sort of meet with trade officials. Secretary Tebbets has been on some of those trade missions, and it's a great opportunity to sort of showcase what Vermont has to offer for products. And then we participate in a food export program, which helps finance businesses to be able to make those international trade relationships. So again, thinking about how do we support businesses at all different stages and sizes, that opportunity works for many of our businesses that are at a scale that they are not looking at direct-to-consumer markets as much, but only looking at wholesale, hoping for that kind of export opportunity. And our maple industry, as well as our dairy, are 2 of, I think, the most established and sort of like market-ready industries to be able to scale to that type of export. So that's very exciting.
It was very exciting. I was very dismayed, actually, that a society that loves natural sugars, and nothing more natural than maple. You drill a hole, put it in a bucket, and boil it, and then it keeps forever. So
Did you tell them it was that simple?
I did. I told them it was that simple. And to go there, believe me, I told them. And to have them not even understand what that was.
Yeah.
When I know, sampling some of their product, it's the same idea, but ours is better. So yeah, it would be to open that market up, where there's 1 billion people plus, if we could get 1% of that market, we would be able to tap enough trees in the state of Vermont. I'm quite sure of that. So.
Yeah, we also receive at the agency a federal marketing fund through USDA called ACER, which is sort of the Latin name for maple, that focuses on exploring new market opportunities. And we've been looking at Texas, for example, so like within the United States, but where we looked at, like airplane travel routes of how many, movement between Vermont and other parts of the country where there was, logically a relationship or a connection established. And so an opportunity in the barbecue industry in Texas, but we've also looked at some international markets. And I think the ACER grant funds, which we have access to every few years, could also be, kind of established to target potentially Taiwan as a
trade routes for the world started, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the trade routes for the world did the same thing. So,
yeah. So I think we have a lot to talk about and connect you to our marketing team.
Mr. Chair, first of all, thank you, Director Willie. Your grant process, having written some grants, the grant writing is not the easiest thing in the world to do.
No, it's not.
Particularly if you're you're a farmer and you're working. So, do we have communication and how to do that? Secondly, you fund about 10% of your applications.
Last fiscal year, yes.
Right. So, do we also to these the farmers that didn't get grants, do we give communication? Hey, here are some federal grants that you can get, or some foundational grants that you can also apply for. Since we didn't, do we do that as well?
Yeah, great questions. Our granting team has standardized over the past 10, 15 years a lot of our grant making processes, which we've had to do out of necessity as we've kind of grown the programs, and they all have different eligibility criteria. Some come with specifications from this body, some come with federal requirements, but we've tried to streamline the process and the experience for the customer as best we can. We have an online grant portal called Web Grants, which is what we use to sort of both filter all applications that come in, all invoices and claims as they come from the businesses. And we're all reporting, in progress reporting is required of our grant recipients. We originally thought that businesses in the ag and food sector were never, and forest sector, which we also support through the Working Lands Program, were never going to submit grants. And what we're realizing is that with the right guidance, with clear instruction, with kind of consistent opportunity and the same process being available year over year, and some of our and collective partnership investments in helping with technical assistance, businesses are willing. So we had almost 1,300 businesses apply for grants through this same web grants portal last year, just in our economic development program. And there's other grants within our agency that businesses also applied for, particularly in the water quality division.
The Maple, they've had where they can get large grants right now, and some of the sugar makers, do you know about that grant? The grants that are out there?
No,
It might be on the
please.
federal side, because there's a lot of money there, but nobody's accessed it. And I think part of it is because filling out the grant application is such
Is difficult.
yeah, very difficult. So
Yeah.
is that something the sugar makers could call to have?
Yeah,
help?
so there's great, they could call us and we could help connect them to resources. And we do this all the time, where we hear from businesses that are wanting to do a project and they don't know where to go for resources, or they know what they want to apply for and they don't feel that they have the capacity or the confidence to be able to complete an application. Our team may not be the one that provides that grant application or writing assistance, but we connect them to resources that do. So there's the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board has a farm and forest viability program that has, dozens of business advisors located around the state that are available to help businesses think about where they should apply and what might be the right funding source, depending upon their vision or their market channel or the quality of life they want to have as a business or what products they're producing. And they can help connect businesses to different funding sources. There's also an affiliated program called READY, which is designed to help businesses in rural communities with specific grant writing assistance. So there's even, over time been developed that capacity to actually work with the business advisors to sit down and write a grant application. I will say, though, that our experience has been that some of the federal funds that have been made available in meat slaughter and processing, potentially this case in the maple sector, though I will admit I'm not familiar with this in particular, are not very accessible to our scale of operations. And so we've had to have many of those conversations with USDA and other partners that these don't reach our businesses based on, the production scale or the complexity of the application or the design plans that they expect businesses to have.
From what I was told by this person was that the money's there, they just people haven't taken the time. And they changed it from, how many classifications, so narrow it down so it's hard to get the money. They've opened it up because nobody's been taking advantage of it. So
we could look at, if you would send it to me, or I can reach out to get it from you, we'd be more than happy to look into it a little bit more. Make sure that the Maple Sugar Makers Association is aware, and maybe they have some ideas as well. Thanks for bringing it up. So Senator Major, the last piece I wanted to respond to was that those 1,000 businesses in fiscal year 24 that we did not give a grant to, every application that is reviewed has very specific and targeted review comments from at least 3 reviewers throughout the process. And we send personalized and targeted responses to every denied applicant to say, we're happy to share very specific feedback on your application. And when appropriate, we offer various other funding opportunities that they could pursue that are either a better fit, or the timeline may be more appropriate, or the size and scale might be a better match. Unfortunately, there's again, in most recent years, many really high quality applications that we don't have a lot of concern with. We just haven't had the resources to allocate. So, great projects have been denied because outstanding projects were just ahead of them in being funded. But we're always open to additional suggestions on how we can connect to businesses and support applicants in their kind of development efforts. But I think we have also made significant intentional efforts in providing them the support that will hopefully help them access grants or other capital or other funding that they could explore.
One of the things that made me feel good about when you started your presentation is that you said communication. And without a doubt, that to the possible recipients has to be on a constant, not just the one time, but on a constant basis, letting them know that these funds are available.
Yeah.
And however we can help guide them in that direction. But it sounds like you're doing a tremendous job.
Yeah, I'm sure there's more we could do. But one of the ways that we share what our funding opportunities are that are available is through a weekly ag bulletin, kind of email newsletter that goes out on Sundays. This came out as a result of the pandemic period when people weren't engaging in the same ways, but it's become a really critical part of our outreach and communication efforts. So it reaches about 5,000 ag and food kind of folks that are either businesses or partners or some other constituency within the sector. And it highlights what are the funding opportunities or training opportunities or success stories or new release of resources that are available. So if you're all not receiving that and would be interested in, I can share with Linda the link so that you could, get that update every Sunday when you're at home and having a cup of coffee and want to see what's happening in the ag world.
It consistently comes out when the pages are down by 21 points. So it's a great diversion. About 5:30 on Sunday.
So it come out a lot this year?
Yeah, 5:30 at night, it goes to 9 bucks, so I really enjoy the diversion.
So being a Bills fan, I don't know.
Wow.
You'll never get it.
Excited.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a great, it's like 4 or 5 things, and it's become very popular.
Yeah.
Well, good.
Great. Well, thanks for being interested in the economic development work that we do. I'm happy
thank
to
you.
come back.
So I think we'll be chatting.
Okay.
So,
All right, Evie.
Evie's gonna come up. Evie is the head of consumer assurance, and there's a lot going on there, everything from avian flu to dairy inspections to weights and measures.
All sorts of fun things. Well, thank you for the time today to come and speak with you all. And for the record, my name's Evie Flory, and within the Agency of Agriculture, I am the Director of Food Safety and Consumer Protection. And within our division, our mission statement is to ensure safe food and fair markets for all Vermonters. Our division is the largest division in the Agency of Agriculture. We have 44 staff members currently, and we cover everything from milk, maple, produce, ag products, meat, and we cover gas pumps, scales, animal health, to scanners and other things. So we cover many things, and we like to say that on any given day, anyone in the state of Vermont, they're interacting with our division, whether it's people that live here or come to visit our beautiful state. They're impacted by our division every single day. So there's been a very busy year this past year, whether it was the flood event impacting our produce farms and dealing with floods, to individuals that thought they were getting gas that had water in it from gas stations that were flooded. And so we had staff members going out to make sure that gas stations did not have water in their storage tanks and other things impacting consumers, things like that. To dealing with, you may have heard that we're dealing with something for the first time that we're aware of in the history of the world, with a disease that spread that usually impacts poultry, has spread to dairy cattle. And so that's something that our division has been involved with in working with the federal government. And that's kind of been a blur this past year in dealing with that. And we've also had, we've seen continued growth across our division in our meat sector. We've seen additional plants come on this year, which has been really exciting for seeing additional individuals moving to our state, seeing our farmers diversifying, having whether it's crossbred cattle or having smaller, diversifying into smaller animals and being able to increase individuals that are slaughtering or having diversified operations, different slaughter days to accommodate those needs. Integrating in a mobile slaughter facility to help cover. We've had decent access in the past with some stoppages with a lot of slaughter facility only wanting to handle large breeds of animals. And so having for some individuals options for your smaller animals, goats and sheep. And so trying to work with industry with that. And we've also had more vendors coming on, being able to do ready to eat products, things like that in the meat world. And so our division, we stay very busy, and we like to stay in the background. We don't really want to be in the limelight. If we're in the limelight, that means that something bad has happened. So we prefer to do our roles and try to prevent food safety incidents or prevent situations where people aren't getting what they pay for. Our weights and measures section spends a lot of their time making sure whether it's propane or fuel trucks, meters, asphalt plants, you name it, anything involved with a scale, like that integrity when you go to the market and you measure your fruit, or when a propane truck or a fuel truck, an oil truck comes to your home, that ticket that you get, that meter that is pumping for someone and says you got X amount of gallons or what have you, that's actually what you got and that you're paying for what you have. That we have staff across the board in the whole state, like ensuring, as Anson said, like consumer assurance that people are getting what they pay for. So we have a very, very dedicated team across our division that's very passionate for what we do. And we do field a lot of complaints and other things that come from constituents, and we try to make sure that whatever those issues are, that we find out, and if those are founded, that we follow up with those businesses and work with them to correct those issues and educate them to try to mitigate those problems for the future. So.
So where are we with the cross contamination from going from bird to cattle? As far as that, it's made the news some and it's caused a little fear, especially in the dairy parts of the state.
Yeah.
Where are we with that?
So right now it's, I'll do just a general overview. Currently to date, it first started in the panhandle of Texas, and the current epidemiology study that has been done and continues to be done by USDA still shows that they believe it was a single spillover event. And what that means and what's important for our farmers is that as the cattle strain of HPAI continues to spread on dairy farms, is that it is spreading from cattle to cattle or from fomites, which would be like the virus on someone's clothes or on their shoes or on a cattle trailer that wasn't cleaned appropriately. It's spreading through that contact and not through birds to cows. So that's really important. Like we've had a lot of our farmers are worried that, migratory birds coming through their farm or eating their feed, like they're worried that they're going to get HPAI. And there has not been evidence to date since that one event in Texas, which was in late February, early March of 2024, but that's not how it's still spreading. So USDA is spending a lot of time and effort, and they can track as it is spread through the country, but it is spreading from cattle to cattle. And so USDA's initiative, they do believe that the strain that is impacting dairy cattle, that they can eliminate it. And to date, the closest states that have had the dairy strain to Vermont has been Ohio and North Carolina. In looking at what we have seen across the country, the movements that USDA has traced is from animal movements, and we don't believe that this is in New England. USDA, about a month and a half ago, released an initiative where they wanted to increase their surveillance in an effort to find where the virus is, to try to find it and then eliminate with more data, knowing where it is to try to mitigate spread, again, with an effort to extinguish it. In working with USDA and with Secretary Tebbets, we identified as a state because we export so much of our milk. Our plan within Vermont, and we started this at the beginning of the new year, we have started testing our dairy farms at the bulk tank level. And so we are testing each one of our cow dairy farms once a month. And so far, all of them have been negative. So we just started a few weeks ago. We've tested right now, right around 50 farms, and we're easing in and developing our processes. Things are going well. And so far, we don't believe this is in New England. There's also been requirements since April of 2024 from USDA for any lactating dairy cattle leaving the state. So this would be nationwide that they had to be tested. And across all of New England and New York State, we've not had any animals test positive. Also, like any cow that has showed symptoms of like HPAI, like veterinarians have had to submit samples. We've not had any in New England or New York State test positive. So currently, we don't believe that it's here. But we are participating in this program with USDA for monitoring. So at this point, we are monitoring to make sure that it's not here. And if it does show up, we will be able to respond quickly to mitigate spread and to help USDA in their initiative to try to extinguish this strain.
Mr. Chair, what's the protocol if it does happen on a farm? Do they stop shipping? What will be the protocol of
So
my farm? It comes on it. Now what happens?
So, excellent question. Early on in this response, the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, they are the federal agency that handles the milk safety, and that's who I primarily work with. Dairy is my specialty within our division at the Agency of Agriculture, and they confirmed overwhelmingly that pasteurization eliminates the virus. So the food supply is safe with dairy, and that was a very relieving thing to confirm. And we have confirmed with our milk cooperatives and processors in the state that if we did have a positive case, as long as the milk is going to pasteurization, farms would still be able to ship their milk. So there wouldn't be an issue with milk leaving the farm. And so if we did have a positive case in Vermont, our animal health section within our division would work with the farm. We would put them in what we call a quarantine, which would be working with the farm to identify animal movements going on and off the farm and identifying ways to clean equipment or cattle trailers and things like that to prevent the potential spreading of the virus to other farms. States that have dealt with this and other farms that have dealt with it, like an adjustment, for instance, would be like animals that need to go off the farm for slaughter. Instead of going to like an auction or to an open market, they would just go direct to a slaughterhouse. Things like that, where we're not opening up for other animals that could possibly get it and spread it to other farms. And it's every farm is different. Every farm is managed differently, and like how long do herds have it? It fluctuates. And so our animal health staff would work with the farm until it has cleared the herd. Unlike with poultry, when they get HPAI, usually with that, you're going to see the poultry flocks, they don't survive the virus. Cows are resilient and they do survive the illness. And so you normally see animals ill for a week to 2 weeks. And so we would be working with the farms until the virus has cleared the farm, and then we would lift the quarantine and things would go back to normal for them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So EBF, it started in Texas, and it has gotten, assuming all the other states are equally as vigilant in terms of keeping track of what's going on. So it's moved up to North Carolina and then to the west to Ohio. Wouldn't it be likely that we would see sort of a state by state, almost a domino effect, which would give us a little bit of an advance warning? Does that make any sense?
Like, Mr. Senator Collmore, so some of the initial spread that happened early on was we didn't even know what we were dealing with as a country. And so what first happened in Texas, it was in Texas and then it went to New Mexico. And veterinarians didn't know what was going on. And, it's just like we had these symptoms, respiratory illnesses, cows didn't really want to drink, they didn't want to eat. You could tell they just didn't feel good. And it's like, what's going on here? And a veterinarian in Texas was like, I'm sending a milk sample in to test for HPAI. Like, we're just testing for all these things, and it tested positive. And it was just like, this has never happened before. Like, wow. So this in-between time, for some of these farms that are really big, you had cattle moving to other farms, like, you had, heifer facilities, you had calving facilities, and all these other farms in other states where they were all moving
Okay,
around.
yep.
And so some of it jumped around initially just because of that. And USDA put incrementally in place certain parameters for movement. And then some of the spread has been found that unfortunately some people did move animals illegally. And so that's been some of the issues that the federal government has been working and trying to handle. For the farm in North Carolina that had it, that was probably at least 6 months ago. And they were what I would call a closed farm, which would be a bit more common in Vermont. They all had their animals all on one property. They got it from one animal. And they kept their farm closed herd, all animals in one place. It cleared and they're fine, back to business as
Okay.
usual. So it did not spread to a lot of other farms. So like their quarantine in place, no, to my knowledge, no other dairy farm in North Carolina got it, and things returned back to normal for them fairly quickly. So
Thanks.
Mr. Chair. And there is no antibiotic for it, you just run, it's a virus, they just let it run its course, right?
yes, like treatments for the animals, like private veterinarians are working with the farms to, treat the symptoms for the cows and making them comfortable and keeping them hydrated and other things like that. USDA is working on vaccine development, but some of that, what USDA has said is like that is not the sole solution, and also vaccines do have trade ramifications in accepting like meat and other things internationally in our products. So I don't know, if a vaccine will be officially approved or not. So that is different things that are in development.
So cattle to cattle spread, it hasn't hit the food source yet, and hopefully maybe if they were to use, I know it's hard to imagine how you get chicken into cattle as far as the feed source, but fat or whatever, that they're using for grains and all that, hopefully in that cooking process of grain or whatever, that would be like pasteurization of milk, so it could spread in that way.
So, like feed sources and whatnot, like food wise, like the milk coming from animals, like pasteurization eliminates any of that. There is not a concern with feed going into dairy cattle. Like dairy cattle are not getting this from birds. There have been some cases where farm workers that worked on a farm that had the cow strain, they were, assisting with either milking the cows that had it or helping treat cows that had it. They went home with their dirty clothes or their shoes and worked on another farm on the weekend that had poultry, and poultry got it, like that strain. The cow strain is deadly to domesticated poultry. So it can spread in that manner. The other confusing point is that the migratory bird strain in wildlife, that HPAI strain that I'm just going to call the bird strain, that is a different HPAI strain that cattle are not getting. They are two separate ones. And that is still a susceptible strain to, like in Vermont, our backyard poultry flocks. So currently we do not believe that we have the cow strain of HPAI in Vermont. We have had a case of the migratory bird HPAI strain. We had that in late December with a backyard poultry flock, and that was for migratory birds. But there have been studies done on our meat supply, properly cooking beef. It's safe to consume. There's not been any trade ramifications or anything like that with our meat or any of our dairy products, and they've been rigorously tested. And as long as the milk is pasteurized, like all of our dairy products are safe for consumption.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you, Dee. Maybe move to the lab. So Cheryl's with us. And we have a facility in Randolph Center. And Cheryl's the director of the lab. That serves not only agriculture, but the Agency of Natural Resources, DEC, as well. So Cheryl.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Cheryl Achilles. I'm the lab director, as Secretary Tebbets indicated.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's nice to meet you all. And Senator Collmore, nice to see you again.
Thank you. Last man standing.
That's right. That's okay.
He's been called purgatory. I don't know what he means by that.
Was never a word I used.
So bad. So the Vermont Ag and Environmental Lab is referenced in two ways. They call it VALE as a general overview, and it's the facility that houses both DEC staff and Agency of Agriculture staff in there. So they go in as the building, but there's an analytical lab that's also called the VALE lab. So still a little confusing to me, but I just wanted to make that clear. So when I
Is this the lab that in conjunction with VTC, and then
is.
we put a new heat source in there because we're trying, the VTC was, they weren't open enough in the summertime, and then sometimes they'd get shut down and you'd have to throw out all your work and all of that.
Yes, funny you bring that up. That heat source, that heat source is not in place yet.
Oh.
So we're
okay.
still
No,
dependent upon
I
the
think we gave
boiler.
you some money for that, so I'll have to talk to somebody about that to help you out with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, we've been working with buildings and general services
Yeah.
with that, and they're in the process of working out the bidding process.
Okay.
So that's the last I had heard on that, but that's their bailiwick.
Well, I have to be on that committee too.
Oh,
So,
good,
Maybe
okay.
we can talk about that a little bit more for
Well,
you.
thanks, Senator Ingles, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That'd be great. So our facility was completed in 2019, for those of you that don't know. The lab was flooded out. It moved around, actually. It was in the Agency of Ag building. It was in Berlin. It was then in Waterbury, up at UVM, and now we're in Randolph Center. And the DEC staff had a lab, and they decided to save costs, merge. And so that's how VALE was born, if you will. So we have 15 analytical staff that I'm in charge of, but there's about 35 overall staff that come in and out of the lab. So the divisions that sit in there, the Agency of Agriculture has some EME staff, so Food Safety Consumer Protection. The Weights and Measures Lab is in there, and the Animal Health Lab. Director Dwinell's lab, the Farm Lab, so it's the Public Health Ag Resource Management crew. They have the Plant Health Pest Management group downstairs and the Entomology Lab. DEC has Fish and Wildlife. They have a fish biology lab, so they're monitoring all of the fish hatcheries, health of all the fish that they stock in all the lakes and ponds and things to make sure they're not introducing any weird illnesses into the wild population. Forest and Parks works, their forest biology crew works a lot with our plant health and pest management team. So they have a very nice entomology exhibit, if you will. They're working on digitizing that. They've lost that catalog a couple of times over the years, but hopefully now we're safe from floods and all of that. They actually have safes, if you will, that are fireproof and waterproof. So fingers crossed. And once they digitize everything, which is an extremely big project, that'll also be, there forever, hopefully. We also have a watershed management division team. So they monitor all the lakes, ponds, and tributaries, and they collect samples of, non-potable water for us, surface waters and things for us to test. Things like phosphorus runoff, chloride, and all of that sort of thing. And they also collect leaf litter from the bottoms of streams, and then their winter project is to go through that leaf litter just to see what kind of wildlife is in there. So if there's a lot of bugs and mollusks and things, that's a good thing in their book, as long as it's not an invasive species. They that kind of indicates the health of the stream that they're looking for. So some of our staff go down to help with that bug picking, they call it. So it's been kind of a fun winter project. A lot of our testing occurs over the summer. So starts in March, I'd say, heavily, and goes through November and slows down in the winter months, because obviously as things freeze up, they can't collect samples. So that's good and bad, right? So we also, the lab, my analytical lab overview, we partner with the Agency of Ag divisions, DEC, and the health department, and our data sometimes informs actions that they want to pursue. So for instance, we have 3 programs within the lab. There's a microbiology program. So that supports EV's division. So we test milk and dairy products for drug residue. So the antibiotic, if there's any antibiotics in the milk, for example, bacteria, and pasteurization quality. We also have staff, 2 dedicated staff that goes out to dairy facilities around the state to ensure that any tests conducted at the local level are being followed under the FDA pasteurization milk ordinances. So there's some specialty training with that. We also provide testing for infectious diseases in equine and livestock, and for performance enhancing drugs at local fair, horse pulls, for example. Potable and non-potable water testing for E. coli and toricoliform, so bacteria in the water that could make people sick. We also do tick testing for emerging diseases. So Steve's group goes out and collects ticks. That's our wintertime fun, is doing tick testing, and we monitor for emerging pathogens there. So they're looking at existing things, where it's tracking within the state, such as Lyme. We know that Lyme's pretty prevalent in Vermont, but we're also looking for emerging viruses too. And so that's a kind of a trifecta, working with the VDH and the farm division with that. So that's good. If you can't tell, we're like a support division. We're not out there in the forefront, but we're quiet partners supporting all of that. We also do cyanobacteria monitoring, and we work with the DEC drinking water division and also the surface water, lakes and ponds division. So if you've probably heard over the summer, algal blooms generally happen towards the end of the summer after a long, hot summer. And we had a lot of positive hits, and that testing generally comes from our lab. Occasionally it's the warnings go out by folks reporting what they see too. So that's kind of a twofold thing, but the tests actually happen at the Vail. In organic chemistry, we have a program that does non-potable water quality testing. I touched upon that with the chloride, phosphorus, lead, mercury, things in water. They have an air toxics metals program as well. They work with DEC. DEC goes out and collects air samples and delivers it to our lab. We do feed and fertilizer testing, and pet food and pet treat label guarantees. So the Agency of Ag has a whole program under Steve's division that helps new people that want to produce pet food and sell it in Vermont. There's a requirement that they have a pet food label guarantee that has fiber and fats and proteins there. So
you're doing a lot there.
Yes. And the other part of that too is farm goes out and collects around stores and things like that. we do spot checks to ensure that the label that's on the bag of dog food or cat food actually says the right thing. So we kind of doing it that way too. So we get a lot of samples that way. And we also have an organic chemistry testing group. So that program does a lot of pesticide residue monitoring and for enforcement or complaints that come in, unknowns, that gets delivered to the lab. So that helps farm. We also do air quality testing. So any of the organic chemistry tests that are in air that make you sick, DEC, it comes in like a little air canister and they deliver it to the lab. So, and we also provide support for local universities. So for example, UVM and Norwich University here this summer, we, undergraduate students do projects, sometimes on a lake or stream project that they're doing. So we provide inorganic chemistry testing for them to help anything that they don't do. Sometimes those schools don't have that particular instrument that we do. So we can help them with their data sets so they can keep on going with their projects. Some of the test improvements that we've done over the last year, we've expanded our cyanobacteria monitoring capabilities. So in the drinking water realm, they wanted to expand not just using the existing kit we had, but to see what was actually all the total microcystin is the type of cyanobacteria that they were interested in. And so we modified our testing for them so they were able to do that. And so the next step they want to do is another method to see if there's some equivalency or if the next method is more robust. So we're working towards an EPA method that we kind of want to go track along with so we can have federal level quality data that aligns with everything. So we can speak the same language, if you will. We also expanded our surface water testing. So those algal blooms that I mentioned before, there's 4 toxins that we're working with. So it's not just microcystins. There are others that can make people and animals sick. So we're monitoring that as well. We've improved some of the safety in our testing. So for example, one of our instruments required the staff to carry a large jug of acid over their head and put it on top. So we're working to get a new instrument that's coming soon where we can improve that so nobody gets burned, so to speak. We also have just this week received certification for our drinking water to do Method 533, that's PFAS in drinking water. And I just want to temper expectations. I reported this to the House Ag and they got excited and I got already a customer looking for testing. So the next step that has to happen, we're working with DEC to roll out a more robust program. We have the capability to do the testing, but we want to do it smartly. So once we produce that result, we want to know how the whole process is going to be. So if somebody has a question, can DEC or the health department be ready to answer those questions, what those health effects could be, et cetera.
Who are your clients on all these tests? Interagency or everyone? Anyone can send in?
Right now, it's going to be interagency, only because there's some complications with the field collection. It's very strict.
Yeah.
And so we're new at this and we want to do it right the first time. So we want to dip our toe in the water, so to speak, carefully and be able to provide a good service and then consider offering it out to the public. But that's future time frame. The capacity, I think, or the interest is going to far outweigh our capacity. But anyways, the certification was a big hurdle, and that's only one part of the step. That's drinking water. We're working towards surface water, soils, vegetation, and food. So there's interest in that as well. That's a whole nother method, and we're working hopefully in the next few months to get that completed. Certification will come later down the road. We did some pesticide, or will do some pesticide testing expansion. So Steve's group has asked us to look into that for their programmatic interests. And our lab information system is called the LIM system. It's every sample that comes into the lab gets a unique identifier, and everything is tracked through this LIM system. So we are working towards upgrading that system this year, actually over the winter, and hopefully that's going to be completed. There's been some complications with the vendor. Nothing new there, right? But hopefully we'll get that done before the spring busy season occurs. But if that doesn't happen, we'll put a pause. We can use our existing system and then implement it when it's slower. So that's exciting for us too. And that's it in a nutshell. Do you have any questions?
Well, Cheryl, thank you very much. So this committee, and Linda can probably remember more than I think it was 2023. It's been a couple of years now. Did a tour. We drove down to Randolph and did a tour of the lab, and it was fascinating to me how much work does go on. So if there's a day where it's not crazy, I just would suggest if we have time that we do that. I think everybody in the committee would appreciate seeing what happens.
We'd welcome you to actually visit.
Well, it's winter time, we want the heat on, so I have.
Well, that's true.
I have to do something with the institutions and get BTS going.
You
So,
betcha.
Yeah, so we're a little influence, I think.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
No.
Cheryl, thank you very
Thank
much.
you, thank
Sounds
you.
very busy, yeah, so I think we need to come see you.
All right. Have a great day. Thanks.
I think we have, one more, and Nicole's head of our operations, and mainly, probably the key part for all would be the budget. Nicole works with that, but also has done a lot with our flood relief and our severe weather relief as well, so.
We saved the best for last.
Maybe.
Oh, you do, yeah.
They don't take you to Japan either.
Oh, yeah.
You're the lawyer.
Yeah.
I know how it feels.
So I think I have enough copies here, but just for reference, I brought kind of an org chart of our agency so you can take a look at. We're missing right now our water quality director, so I'll just say that that's one of our other divisions, and
She'll be coming tomorrow.
yes, I was just, thank you, Linda, I was just gonna say that. If you have any questions about the budget, I'm
Oh, I'm
happy
sorry.
to
Go back.
take
Yeah, no,
them.
Here we go.
Otherwise, I can talk about the Ag Recovery Task Force and anything to do with recovery or the state programs. I'll leave it to you where to start, because I know we're on limited time. And for the record, I'm Nicole Dubuque, I'm the Chief
You
Operating.
start where you want to start.
Okay, I'm gonna start with the Ag Recovery Task Force. So Secretary Tebbetts had talked about the federal disaster declarations that we've had over the past couple of years, the flooding, the frost in 2023, as well as the flooding in 2024. The Ag Recovery Task Force I am the co-chair of. My co-chair is Dr. Roy Beckford from UVM Extension. And we started running task force meetings in August of 2023, and we are still going. We do drop-in sessions regularly, and then we've kind of moved to quarterly meetings. But that task force has really brought together ag partners, federal agencies, multiple branches of USDA, UVM Extension, as well as the Agency of Natural Resources and our agency. We make sure to collaborate, and we can survey the public and the ag sector together so that we don't have all of us asking farmers separately about their losses and damages. It's worked really well. We put out a report in 2023 on some recommendations, and then in 2024 we've continued to kind of work on that collaborative effort. One of the programs that came after the disasters was the Business Emergency Gap Assistance Program in 2023, and then recently we had a round in 2024. And for agriculture specifically, we had around 100 applications that came through, and it was 13.5 million reported in damages for the ag sector, and then another 5 million reported for forest products. So we just to give you some background on VGAP, what it covers, and it's state funded, is 30% of physical damages reported on the application. So out of the 13.5 million reported for ag, we paid out 2.7 million to folks. People have reported that that's very helpful, but obviously it doesn't make them whole, and I won't go into detail again because Secretary Hubbott's already touched on the issues that we have with being able to insure assets in Vermont, insure crops specifically, and also aging infrastructure. So I'll pause there if we have any recovery questions. And then
I think we're good.
Okay.
Yep.
Budget questions. So I know Senator Collimore was here last year for our budget presentation, but obviously the rest of the committee is new. So our CFO had provided you with a quick spreadsheet.
Do we have you?
And I have that here. So I'm happy to take any questions, or we can just review the whole thing. As you see, the base appropriations are divided out by our 6 divisions. Administration division is where I sit, and we haven't really talked about all the details that go into that, but that's the business office, including licensing and registration, our communications team, who is integral in creating that calendar you guys have over there, and then energy and land use, so like Act 250, Criterion 9B, and Section 248. So yeah, base appropriations is broken down by division. We have general fund, special fund, federal fund there, and then we break it down with our one-time appropriations, which are specifically Northeast Organic Farming, Conservation Districts, NOFA Crop Cash, and Farm. Those are the one-time appropriations from last session. That would be for fiscal year 25. And then we have 2 capital appropriations in here, which would be the farm capital projects and the water quality. The heat plant that we were talking about earlier would be through BGS. So
Right.
we request it, but they have the money because they're doing the actual work. So, yeah.
I think that one thing that would be helpful, just while you're all here, is to have you come in and talk to us about VGAP a little bit. We're hearing some of that. I mean, I know enough about it, but a new committee and all that would be very, very helpful if we could schedule some time with Linda with that as well. So, and just, we just have a few minutes left, and just kind of why we all have you here. You guys are, thank you for this. I know this is hard sometimes to bring what you guys bring, but on a new committee, it's very, very valuable to understand all of what you're touching and all what we're going to be listening to and have to know about. Just in the last 2 minutes that we have, the health of ag in the state of Vermont, how is it? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, I guess, again, Anson Tebbets, I guess it depends where you're standing. It's certainly undergoing change. If you talk about inputs for supplies, services, very high, and I think everyone knows that in their daily lives, that's been a real difficult part for the farm community. On the dairy side, we are seeing some somewhat decent prices for the price of milk, which has helped, but the inputs continue to be high. The organic community and dairy is I think going through some growing pains and struggling a little bit. Those inputs and the prices they've been locked into have not kept pace, so I think there's a little struggle with that. There's tremendous growth in maple. Again, we're seeing, we're the #1 producer of maple in the United States. 50% of all maple in the United States is made in the Green Mountains. So we've seen diversification is gone from maybe a dairy farm having a few thousand taps to, sole big businesses. So we have some significant maple. Your district, I believe, has the biggest maple producer with well over 600,000 taps.
Oh.
And they export, they really don't even market in Vermont. They export to other parts of the country through 6-ounce glass bottles. They market under Sapjack, but they're Others that are making more value-added products of maple, but significant growth with that. We saw that with our grants where we earmarked a little bit of maple money for folks. We saw hundreds of applications, and technology in maple was really advanced. I think one of the programs, Senator, you were talking about was the specialty crop one. And that one, there was at the end of the USDA term here, they did put out a special one for USDA. And that was for specialty crops, and maple was eligible for that. So I checked with FSA, and they said there were a considerable amount of maple applications that were making through that part of it. So I think that was something new that came at the tail end. That granting program has ended. Veggies, produce, we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of products put in the mail and sent to people. Senator, you have one of the great meat producers in the Wagyu beef in Springfield, and their model is we put it in a package on Tuesday, and it's on a grill in Chicago on Friday night for folks. So you'll see that. You'll see Dakin Farms during Christmas time. A lot of stuff is being put in the mail because e-commerce. So there's a trend to direct to consumer. That's happening. And there's a lot of pressures on our farm community. The environment is huge. With them, there's a lot of mandates that are on them that they're stepping up and they're doing it, and it's going well. This is the 10th anniversary of Act 64, which is our major water quality law. People understand it now. So we hope that, that will continue, but the investments, some of the investments to meet some of those are significant. There are cost share programs, but even with the cost share programs, 10% of a $500,000 system, manure system is not a small amount to comply with. So, but there's been trends. We learned a lot of information through the pandemic where we learned our food system nationally probably wasn't the best. We found it probably best to have a regional food system. We can grow and produce a lot of high quality food. It's whether we can get it to our markets. And we're fortunate enough that we have significant markets to our south of us that may pay a little bit extra for that product because it is high quality. They know when they get Vermont cheese, it's high quality. But there's always there's a cost and association with that. We're struggling with labor. No issue there. Housing, you're going to hear a lot in this session about housing and education, but housing is significant because we have even small to medium cheesemakers are having trouble finding employees because there's no place to live. And it may be, even down in Addison County with Cabot, they struggle with housing, and in my hometown of Cabot, they struggle with housing, finding enough workers. And so you get up into Greensboro in the Kingdom, you've got some cheesemakers up there that are struggling and having discussions about housing. So it's all connected with it. But it's an honor to be part of agriculture because in the end of the day, they're all feeding us. And that's their mission. They do a pretty darn good job of it. Think about all they do. So I know we're at the end of this, but we will see. If you want to meet a lot of your constituents, they'll be here on the 28th. I know that's budget day, but we're having a little reception with some of the producers. So your beekeepers will be there. Yeah. You'll get some good food. That's one good thing about this committee. You're never going to be, you're never going to, there's going to be good food everywhere you go on the Ag Committee. So, that's at 4 o'clock for a nice reception. You get to meet some of the people, the various groups around the state. With your permission, yeah. Mr. Chair, I wanted to just pass out some goodies. My card is in this, and also this publication, Edible Vermont, which gives you, I think I got 5, I got one short.
Yep, no, you got it.
I got it. And then my card's there, and then there's a publication called Ag Review, which you may not be able to find the New York Times, but you can find the Ag Review, which has been around a while. And we use it to communicate with the farm community. So there's programs, our granting programs. It's also available digitally, and we'll send along the digital sign-up sheet to you after the meeting. But you get a sense of the wonderful food with Edible Vermont, and they usually have a theme and so forth. It's just a fun publication that it's out there. I think it's based down your neck of the woods. I think it's down in Benton County.
So just 30 seconds,
Yeah.
less than it. Do you oversee cannabis as well?
We do not, but do we do the pesticide part of it, Steve?
It's a little complicated. A little complicated.
So
We don't, but we do, I know from time to time, you can talk about the pesticide, that would be probably the closest touch we get.
You're talking about food, you weren't talking about edibles, were you?
But, I've gone on tours and, the similarities of growing a crop, it's the same, I've gone on tours to, the soil and the health and the pests, and so there's similarities to it, so.
Well, we want to thank you.
Yeah.
Very much.
One final,
Yeah.
can I just introduce Steve Collier?
Yeah.
He's the lawyer, but I don't let him talk. But Steve is a real great resource. He works with your legislative council on language and whatever, and you'll see a lot of Steve in the building.
We've seen a lot of them. Yeah, good guy.
Thank you for that token.
Made it worth coming, right?
We appreciate you coming in, new committee, but, we're here to, help you in any way, communications back and forth. If there's anything that we can do to help, let us know. We are an ag committee. We made that very clear in our first meeting. We are not a political meeting. We're an ag committee. We're here to help the people in agriculture in the state of Vermont. And, so if we're missing something, communicate with us. Let us know anything that we can do, anything that we need to be aware of, just make us aware. And we appreciate that very much.
Thank you. Great to meet you.
Thank you all for